Mailbag time. Welcome into the Autzen Audibles podcast. I'm Matt Prehm, Erik Skopil on the show, as always, on this Monday, September 15th, going into the fourth week of the college football season. And that's the thing, Erik. It feels like it takes forever for college football to get here every year in the off season. But man, once it starts, it goes by so fast. It's just saying that in my head. Week 4 of the college football season seems wild to me. It's technically week 5 for some teams if you played week 0. The season goes by so fast. I hope you guys are enjoying it. Don't miss the action. As Oregon gears up for its 4th game, its 3rd game at home this season, and it's another rivalry game. It's going to be the second version of the game that was formerly known as the Civil War, played outside of the conference. Still feels weird that this game is played in September, but nonetheless, I think we've got some questions around the mailbag that kind of tailor indirectly or directly around this game and the kind of the big scope for Oregon going into its 4th game of the year.
Speaking of it feeling weird that we're this far, yeah, one of the questions we'll get to, it asks, like, hey, we're at the quarter mark of the season. And I was like, we are. That is, and after this game, we'll be at the 3rd mark of the season, and we're not that far from the half point of the season. Once Oregon plays Indiana after the bye week, so yeah, the year goes by way too fast. Hope Duck fans, like you said, are enjoying it. It's been 3 decisive wins, 2 a little bit more dominant, at least on the scoreboard, than the 3rd. But I think the Ducks are ahead of schedule. So let's get into it. This one from @Lando Quack. After the sour finish against Northwestern, what kind of performance Saturday against the Beavs would make you feel better going into Penn State in a couple weeks? Hashtag Autzen Audibles. Thanks for using the hashtag Lando. Well, just to start, like, I still feel decent about Oregon beating Penn State. Like, nothing for me really, really, really changed. I will say, I think I don't know if, honestly, I don't, because these opponents are so different. I don't know if there's much that Oregon's going to do against Oregon State that's going to feel like it matters a lot. If I'm just being totally honest, I guess the areas that I'd like to see shored up, quote unquote, a little bit more would be just line of scrimmage on rundowns. Didn't think Oregon's run offense was quite as much pop. They got some stuff going off tackle, especially with the D.A. Hill runs. He had 94 yards. Like, basically all of those were off tackle for big gainers. Between the tackles, had a harder time, and then defensively, bottled up the run game at times. Also gave up a big one at the end, which, again, you can kind of nitpick if you want, but to give up over 170 yards against Northwestern, especially with the game kind of out of hand late and just letting a big explosive happen, that was disappointing. I'm going to need to be much better in the trenches against Penn State. So I guess I'd start there, but I just wanted to make sure I acknowledge, like, I don't know if Penn State's necessarily looked a lot better than Oregon. Like, there was a little discussion on the message board about how Northwestern put down Villanova really bad at home, but both Oregon and Penn State were up 31-0 after 3 quarters. Oregon was on the road against a Big Ten team. Penn State was at home against Villanova. Oregon's margin of victory, certainly much more impressive the first 2 games. Not saying I'm not impressed with Penn State, but I'm also not going to come up here and say that they're a finished product, because they're also 3-0 and ranked a little higher than Oregon. So I still feel like it's absolutely a toss-up game. We'll kind of get to predictions once we get to that game, but I'd like to see Oregon better in the trenches, but I'm not, like, hitting the alarms is, I guess, where I'm at.
Go back to play these games. Like, Oregon plays these games against Stanford in the Pac-12, and especially the last 8 or 9 years of Stanford, where they weren't the David Shaw early years, the Jim Harbaugh Stanford that we knew, but they played slow football. They ate up the clock. They limited possessions. You weren't going to get the same amount of possessions. They played a defense that, hey, nothing is going to be taken over the top. And I think the way that game played out, 34-14, Oregon certainly didn't play perfect. There's no doubt about it. But they still pulled their starting quarterback, I think, late in the 3rd quarter or early 4th. They were winning this game 34-0. And if 2 touchdowns don't get scored by Northwestern's first team offense against a collection of true freshmen, walk-ons, and guys deep on the bench for Oregon's defense. If those 2 touchdowns don't get scored, and we're talking 34-0 Oregon, our entire mentality of, and I understand Lando Quack is, I'm not trying to say like he's super negative here and he speaks for the entire Duck fan nation, but like a sour finish isn't being discussed. And like Dan Lanning coming out and saying like, hey, the standard's the standard. If you're playing, I don't care if I'm paraphrasing now, like if you're the third string guy or the starter, like the standard's the standard. And that is awesome. That makes sense. Head coach should hold it to that standard. But the reality is, at some point when you play Power 5 versus Power 5, or I guess Power 4 now, Northwestern still has good players. And when you're playing your third and fourth string guys against their starters, they're probably going to win those battles more often than not. Maybe not going to be easy wins. So I kind of go into this Beaver game thinking like Oregon is still humming. They're still like, I don't need to see drastic improvements in certain areas. Maybe that run defense against Northwestern was a little bit of a concern, even when Oregon starters were in the game. I think for me, it's limit penalties. Like Northwestern game, Oregon didn't have any. That's awesome. Like if you can do that again, holy smokes. If you take your deep shots, connect on a couple of them, like I don't know what the percentage needs to be. Like limit maybe it's just simple as like, hey, create explosives when they're there and limit them to the best you can against Oregon State. Make the Beavers drive the length of the football field if they're going to have to score. And that's what Oregon's defense did against Northwestern. I guess maybe don't let up. Don't let the killer instinct dip like Dan Lanning talked about.
That's a good one. That's a good one, Matt.
Like don't just get complacent with a 34-0 lead going into the fourth quarter. Or early in the fourth quarter. So I think the spread's already jumped. It opened as a 27.5 and it quickly jumped to 35.5. Like Oregon's a 5-score favorite in this game. I think at this number, 35, that's where that's going to be really hard to cover a spread. Like you have to play really, really well. And your opponent has to play poorly. And the Beavers are going to be outclassed. They're not going to be the same talent level as Oregon. But I wouldn't focus more on the point spread in this game, but more so on the execution and the production and the efficiency that Oregon has and the pre-snap penalty or lack of penalties.
A couple more that just came to mind as you were talking there, Matt, and a good point in terms of the finish. I will also say, while I think that would be encouraging to see the standard not change, I don't know how much that translates to the Penn State game when you just don't expect, unless you're cruised or you're getting cruised on, I guess, those players to play. I guess I just don't know if how much that matters. And then the other part would be. Rivalry games can get chippy. You want to make sure you come out of this game with all your personnel, whether it be we haven't seen any targeting. Gosh, I hate that I brought that up. I'm knocking on wood because I might have just jinxed him, and Oregon fans are going to give me crap all week if that happens. But that comes to mind. And then Noah Whittington didn't play against Northwestern. Against Penn State, you need him.
That's notable.
That felt like a big part from a personnel perspective. His absence was felt. Not that Jaden Lamar couldn't handle some of it, but I think Jaden Lamar is a supplementary guy, not a lead back. And I think De'Aaron Hill is certainly like an awesome player in kind of a gadget role. If you can, like I wrote about in my takeaways from the game on Sunday, my lessons learned column, which I go recommend you guys take a look at. Just like, I love how Will has utilized De'Aaron in terms of putting him in situations where he can get out in space and do exciting things, but he has not been, if you look at the numbers between the tackles, very productive. He's been awesome off tackle, not as productive between the tackles. I don't know if he can be, that number one back. So Noah's health comes to mind here. Not losing anybody in a rivalry game where maybe things get a little chippy. Maybe there's some shots that are taken, physically that are dangerous. And to get to a question at the end here, certainly like I don't question Dante's health, but and maybe I'm previewing a question at the end here. He's taken some shots the last couple of games, and so That one comes to mind too. Is we all anticipate, especially with the line that Matt was talking about, this game being not very competitive, but get out of this game with your core players available for Penn State. That to me is like almost the number one thing. I know that's not necessarily what we want to see on Saturday, but that's the result you want to leave Saturday with, I guess.
100%. Like you want to see maybe some positive steps in the right direction. You want to see positive health. Your point about Noah Whittington is key. I think that's critical for the impact of the offense against Northwestern. Like, I think fans, we're still learning about like the traits and narratives around each Big Ten team. I honestly think Northwestern is going to be a lot like Stanford. They were very, very sound. They didn't make a ton of technical mistakes. They tackled well in space. They just didn't have the athlete that Oregon had. But they weren't going to make coverage busts. They weren't going to be sloppy with their play. They were sound, and they made, they're going to be the Stanford program. Not the one under Harbaugh and Shaw that went to Rose Bowls and all that, but like
Preston Stone's not Andrew Luck, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But even in 22 or in 21 or in 20, Stanford was still kind of a shell of what that Stanford teams were, what those teams were, where they still played sound football. They still had a couple of guys that were some dudes. And that's going to be Northwestern. You're going to go there, and there's not a lot of juice because it's a small venue, small fan base. It's not a football school, but they play sound football. And so I don't know. I'm having a hard time knowing all the elements, knowing the venue, and knowing that Oregon still won by 20 points and didn't play even remotely close to their A+ level of football. Like, I don't think there should be a bunch of concern coming out of Evanston, Illinois.
Let's hop over to the second one from @Hodges_Ryan, who I know has been a frequent question asker. Thanks for listening and asking questions. Through the first quarter of the season, what players have surprised you most, either pleasantly or not? Autzen Audibles. I figure we could each do like one on each side of the ball, positive, and then maybe one on each of the ball, negative. I'll start with positive on the offense, and it'd be Malik Benson for me. Another thing I wrote about on Sunday, my lessons learned, was it seems like he's pretty clearly their number 2 receiver in the pecking order. He actually leads the team in targets, receptions, receiving yards, receiving touchdowns. Some of those are ties. The touchdowns are second in receiver snaps. It's averaging like 15 yards per reception. Has the largest ADOT. He's kind of taken over that Z receiver role where he's running the longer routes downfield. The sequence at the end of the first half, which I know we referenced on Saturday after the game, I don't think it's by mistake that Dante threw exclusively to Corian, to Malik, and to Kenyon. Those were the 4 guys he had completions to, all of for first downs or touchdowns, and several of those for 20+ yards downfield. He's been somebody that I think we didn't know what to make of. Had very little production at Alabama or Florida State. The JUCO film suggested this was like one of the better wide receiver prospects to come from that level in a really long time. The production at the other 2 schools suggested maybe that wasn't the case. And then in the spring game, he didn't do a whole lot, and he dropped a long pass attempt, which we all probably made way too much out of because we had one data point. It was a spring game, and we all said, maybe this guy can't catch a football. He's caught everything thrown his way this year. He has no drops, 11 catches and 13 targets. And to me, he's been a really pleasant surprise. And it feels like, at least athletically, he's the type of guy you want out there who probably is going to run 4.3, low 4.4, or something like that when he gets to the combine and shoot. Maybe he's giving himself a chance to get drafted or at least be on an NFL roster in the future. So that's an easy one for me.
On the offensive side of the football for me, it's Deer Hill.
Yep.
I like your Benson pick. I actually think he's going to lead the team in receptions.
It's looking that way.
And I think he might be the guy that leads the team in receiving yards too, probably touchdowns. So I like your pick at receiver with Malik Benson. For me, it's going to be Deer Hill. Through 3 weeks of the season, he leads the team in rushing yards by 2 yards over Noah Whittington. And essentially, Whittington has had 3 extra carries. And now he didn't play in one of those 3 games. So that probably changes a little bit here. If Whittington actually would have played in the Northwestern game. But I still kind of think Deer Hill's production would have been what it was against Northwestern, regardless of Deer Hill playing or not. But then what really surprised me I went to Pro Football Focus and looked at the running backs and just looked off offensive grading numbers. Hill grades out as the best back on Oregon's team. Guess, though, Eric, where he's at nationally.
This is just his overall offense grade?
This is the overall offensive grade.
12. I'm guessing it's high.
Really close. He is 9th in the country. You don't worry about minimum rushing attempts, anything of that nature. So, like, Samuel Singleton's the number 1 ranked back in Pro Football Focus. He's played 5 snaps this season. The second guy is 4. But Hill has played in 19 snaps. He's had 11 rushing carries, 2 touchdowns. He's highly productive. Certainly, like Jonah Coleman at Washington, Antoine Raymond at Rutgers, Jacoby Williams at Texas Tech, Ahmad Hardy. Those are guys that have like 35 to 62 snaps. So Hill has about half or maybe a little bit less than that of some of these other guys, but he's highly productive when he plays, and he's grading out incredibly high. It's probably going to dip a little bit as his snap count, if it stays the same, and other guys pull away, and you'll have to make some adjustments to sort this to get him into the conversation because of minimum snap counts. But right now, he's one of the top 10 running backs in Pro Football Focus in the country from a pure grading perspective, and it's probably more if you say you got to play 10 or more snaps. Really, really impressive. I really think going back to the CBS game against Oklahoma State where the TV crew talked about it, where, paraphrasing, Dan Lanning told the TV crew that they had high expectations from Mekhi Hughes, but when the freshmen showed up, the freshmen were a lot better than anticipated, and I think that's playing out.
By the way, it blows my mind that had almost 100 yards on 7 snaps. I wish snap counts were something that were more readily available, like earlier on in the Oregon era, just to find someone comparable who's playing this sort of a role. Because like you even think about, because like I said, the type of plays that he's having success on, it does remind me of early DeAnthony Thomas, but I think even then it felt like he was playing a lot more than is. I mean,
I would agree. I would think DeAnthony Thomas has played a lot more. DeAnthony Thomas's freshman year was what?
Oh, what year? 2012, maybe? 2010?
2011.
Okay. One of the two.
Pro Football Focus, they don't have it.
They didn't go back that far.
Yeah. They had it in the seasons, but when you click 2011, there's nothing there. Yeah,
that's what I'm saying. It would have been cool to have just seen that data. So I guess you mentioned a name, and this is just my biggest surprise offensively. I guess not pleasantly, to use the word Brian asked. It's Mekhi. And it's not even that Mekhi's played awful when he has played, but he's just not doing very much. And it's notable that I was looking at it, like he has the same number of carries as and he's run for like 124 less yards. He has 36 rush yards on 11 carries. has, what did you say, 161 on 11, I think was the number. So hasn't been explosive. There's been some decent runs where but it's just like he's in traffic all the time. And I guess it was interesting that he was their third running back to see the field on Saturday. Both Jaden and Jordan Davison played before him. But you're just not seeing a whole lot out of him. And for a guy you brought in who's a preseason All-American, that's a pretty easy pick when through 3 games he's carried it 11 times for 36 yards. And he's not somebody that you're talking about really seriously as like early on it was, okay, he should be playing more. But I think most people who are being objective with what they're watching feel like they kind of get why some of these other guys are playing more. Not that they think he's bad, because there are some moments where he runs through traffic and breaks some tackles and you see some of that power and explosiveness. But I'll also say I was a little bummed because I picked him maybe to get 50 or more yards, and he carried it 1 time for 5 yards on Saturday. Again, got in early, carried it once, and I was like, oh, here we go. Maybe this is going to be a big Mekhi Hughes game. And then he just wasn't involved. So that was an easy one for kind of disappointment for the offense.
I would say the same thing. So we don't need to go me.
Kind of easy pick. Okay. Defense. I'll let you go first since I went first on offense. Pleasant surprise.
Defensively, we go back to spring football, and Mike Lowski, Oregon's linebacker coach, spoke with the media, was straight up asked, why did you not go to the portal? And he's like, I like our guys. I like our depth. I like the development that we have. And fair, or probably more likely unfair, he received quite the criticism within the fan base when he said that answer. I don't think there was a lot of confidence that beyond Betcher and Jackson, maybe even just Betcher, that you felt as definitively strong as the coaching staff did. And that kind of tells us, hey, coaches kind of know what they're doing. They know the room. They're paid high money for a reason. You flashed to now 3 weeks into the season, Oregon's highest rated linebacker on the roster, who happens to be the highest rated linebacker in all of college football through 3 weeks, with 20 minimum percentage of snaps of 285. You eliminate that and just go one snap. He still is the highest rated linebacker in college football. That's Jerry Mixon.
Yep.
Really, really good. Bryce Betcher is a stud. We know it. He grades well. He's playing well. He's the leader of this team. But Jerry Mixon is the Pro Football Focus's highest rated linebacker right now in 2025. He's the 12th highest rated defensive player of all positions in college football through 3 weeks. He is a dude. He is playing at a high level, and I think he continues this. The NFL is certainly going to be on the discussion board for him at the end of the season. He's really big. He's really athletic. He's shown that he can make catches. He's good in coverage. Mixon has turned into an all-conference caliber linebacker in his 3rd year in the program, and he's making his position coach look really, really good when he said, no, we're good. We didn't need the portal. I like our guys.
Yeah, and speaking on the NFL thing, he does also have the family legacy there with his cousin, Joe Mixon, obviously a pretty dang good running back in the NFL, long career. I would imagine there'll be just a little extra interest with just knowing the family connections there. That's an easy one. That's why I let you have it, because I took the easy Malik Benson on offense. Figured I'd give you the easy Jerry Mixon on defense. That's the pick, and Jerry's been. On the broadcast they talked about it. It's the ball productivity, but it's also the fact that he's pretty decisive in the run game. Made a couple plays behind the line of scrimmage. He had a touchdown saving tackle. I know it didn't end up mattering because Northwestern scored, I think, on the next play, but kind of came out of nowhere and took the running back out. Short right before the goal line. He's a really impressive player. The ball skills were something that Bryce Betcher had brought up during my time with him down at Big Ten Media Day. And Dan even brought up the fact that he kind of baits the quarterbacks. I know the first one against Oklahoma State, Zane Flores just didn't really know what was going on. It seemed like kind of just threw the ball to a part of the field and didn't see him. But still, he made up some ground. And then this last one, I don't think Preston thought there was a chance in heck he was getting around him to pick it off. And there he was. So, yeah, he's been really, really impressive. And if I'm going to do another pleasant surprise, it's maybe not as much the play. It's just how much the true freshman corners are playing. Brandon Finney and Eam offered some up and down moments for both of them the last couple of weeks in terms of, I think, some coverage mistakes. And Neem was in decent position on Saturday on one of those long passes and just kind of slipped at the point and wasn't able to get up there and compete. I think he would have probably had a chance to make it more difficult on the receiver at least. So I'm not saying they've been perfect. I know if you look at the PFF grades, that they suggest they haven't been all that good. Matt, I know you've got that maybe in front of me so you can run through it, but I was looking at yesterday. They weren't super impressive.
Yeah, offered his defensive grade is 58. He's the 8th worst defensive player rated by Oregon on this team by Pro Football Focus. Brandon Finney is the 12th worst. He's at 61.3. Dakota Fields is at 61.9.
Where's Iffy?
Iffy is at 66.5. Theron Johnson graded out 68.1 in his 22 snaps against Northwestern, which was his season debut. And I think you run through these numbers and you go, oh man, that's not good. I think this is just growing pains of a unit that's playing a bunch of true freshmen or redshirt freshmen. And that's going to come with the case.
And also, hate to say it, caliber of opponent matters a little bit here in terms of even giving them much of a sample size to do anything on. And so, like, if you get beat in coverage and there's only 3 instances you're targeted, I don't have I know they actually do have how many times you've been targeted, how many catches stats on PFF, but if you were to look at it from that perspective, the sample sizes are small. So if you make some mistakes, like I mentioned, those guys have, it's going to impact that. Whereas if you had a game, which maybe you're going to see here in a couple of weeks with Penn State, maybe it's even going to be the Beavers with the quarterback that at least wants to throw the ball. I'm not going to say he's going to be super accurate or productive, but Malik Murphy is going to try to throw the football. Maybe that can improve some of these grades because, if you're only targeted 5 or 6 times and you give up 3 catches, it's going to make your coverage grades aren't going to be great.
To answer your question, if he's been targeted 8 times, Finney has been targeted 7, and then Dalen Austin has been targeted 6, and then Jerry Mixon has also been targeted 6 times. They're tied for the
2 or 3 targets per game is what we're talking about. And if you get beat in one of those, your coverage grade is going to be kind of crappy. Is my point.
Yes, 100%.
Disappointment on defense, Matt. Anybody jump the line there?
I don't know if it's necessarily a disappointment for him, but more so, and I don't know if disappointment maybe is the right way to frame it, but much like Mekhi Hughes, maybe I'm taking the easy one here. I was not anticipating Jalil Florence, knowing all the youth in the room. He's played 1 game on the defensive side of the football, and that came against Oklahoma State. He did not play on defense against Montana State. He did not play on defense against Northwestern. The fact that he's like not even in the rotation is such a surprise to me. That just really blows my mind. And so I don't know if it's necessarily a disappointment, but just I wasn't anticipating, much like Mekhi Hughes. I was thinking Florence would be a regular contributor, if not a starter, would be kind of the team leader of this unit because of his age and his experience. And he's not even seeing the field, which is just shocking to me.
Speaks to the thing I was just talking about with my pleasant surprise is just these young corners having carved out the role. And again, while it hasn't been perfect, whatever they're showing in practice indicates it's been better than what they're seeing from a guy like Jalil. I do think, not to go too far down this, but Theron coming back and playing as many snaps as he did and playing as well as he did, I thought he was very solid. He had a couple moments in coverage that were, I guess, not perfect, but had made some nice plays in space. I wouldn't be surprised to see him play like near the most snap counts against Penn State. Like I can see it going that direction where they want that veteran presence because there have been a couple of coverage like busts, missed assignments from some of these young guys over the course. Not very many, but enough where it stood out. And you just kind of going into a game against Penn State, who has struggled, by the way, to really throw the ball to the outside this year. You'd like to have some veterans. So that's Jalil's a good one to highlight. I guess in terms of guys who have played quite a bit, and maybe it's just because it's easy to compare and contrast here, but Devin Jackson and Jerry Mixon, I just look at those 2 guys and go, Devin's got about 20 more snaps played, 30 more snaps played than Jerry. Devin's one of the leaders in the team in defensive snaps. I think he might have led the entire team against Northwestern. It was really close. I was looking at it yesterday, and it's just not been quite as good. I was messaging with our student writer, John Evans, who's going to do a breakdown on this, I think, later in the week, and just about linebacker play. It doesn't necessarily always look like he's quite as decisive as he needs to be. It feels like he's kind of, it reminds me of the quote that was kind of critical of where he was early in his career, but I think it was Tosh or Michalowski, of like, it doesn't matter how fast you are if you're not running in the right direction. I don't think it's that he's been running in the wrong direction. I think it's that he's like, in track, you can get a false start and you're going too fast. He's almost like the opposite. He's almost like kind of stuck a little bit slow, a little flat-footed, doesn't quite get moving in the direction quite like you need, and which is what makes, I think, Bryce and Jerry a little bit more productive to this point. So that would be mine. And I still think he's a valuable player. His athleticism stands out every time you watch him, but he kind of neutralizes it, at least to my eyes, a little bit early on here with some of his approach. It just seems like maybe instincts are a little bit slow out of the gates. And frankly, with how well Jerry's playing, I'm curious to see if we see these splits change as the year goes.
Absolutely. And that's the one that I'm really surprised too with Devin Jackson. And if I had to go outside of Florence, and I think maybe that just speaks to just some guys' development slow, some guys' development can be really rapid, and some guys they're the same player kind of throughout their time. It feels like Devin Jackson's maybe kind of still the same player he was, or just slightly better than he was when he arrived. And Jerry is a guy that has just kind of incrementally gotten a little bit better year 1 to year 2, now year 2 to year 3, and you compare it from the first time he stepped on campus, and he's drastically better. Both guys still play a lot. Both guys should still play a ton. All right, that's going to do it for the first half of the show. Let's come back, take a quick break. We'll dive into the second half of the questions. All right, welcome back to the Autzen Audibles podcast. 2 questions in, 2 more to go.
First half, we're kind of big picture. Now we're getting into kind of some of the details here. I thought these were kind of fun. This question in particular, I hadn't thought about. I kind of like it here from @DunksInDucks. If Oregon takes a large lead versus the Beavers, should Dan Lanning instruct fans to be loud when Oregon has the ball in preparation for next week's game at Penn State? #AskAudibles. I know Dan won't do that, but the reality is Northwestern was not a real road test. 0 penalties on the road is always impressive, but I'm also not surprised there weren't any procedural issues. You were out there, Matt. I know there was probably more crowd noise. Dan mentioned there was a big speaker behind his sideline, and he thinks that he had a pretty good line about how they should probably keep that with the new stadium they're building. But that was not a traditional road environment, and very much a far cry from what they're going to get in a couple of weeks in the whiteout with Penn State. I don't think they're going to do this, but it does raise the point of hey, you could go into Penn State without really having been in even a remotely challenging environment, without having to trot out a silent, your silent count, trot out how you're orchestrating in crowd noise. And that is a thing that feels worth knowing and discussing. You kind of wish there would have been a little bit more, frankly, last game.
Yeah, the crowd noise was definitely pumping negative from a artificial standpoint. It was not loud. It was not a place to test your, I guess, fortitude against a hostile environment. Again, I've made it a ton of times. Very Stanford-ish, very relaxed crowd. They were there because this is what you do on a fall Saturday. You go watch a little bit of football, and then once the game gets out of hand, you leave and whatnot. This would never happen. I also think it would also be a little disrespectful, like asking towards the other team. But the fireworks and the drama that would come from this, I would love to see it happen. That in and of itself would be awesome to see. But I do think it's going to be interesting to see maybe the next. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if they're starting to maybe crank up the artificial noise at practice right now, just to get yourself more acclimated. Why wait? Because you're playing at home this weekend. Why wait? Do it now against the next couple weeks of practice, so you're ready to go for Penn State. And if I'm Dan Lanning too, though, I bet you this team got a little bit more discussion than he liked the last couple weeks going into Penn State. They were really flying under the radar until I think Joe Klatt went on social and was like, this might be the best team in the country. I think they've got, no one's sleeping on them. Kirk Herbstreit did it on the ABC game of the week. I think after week 2 of circling them, no one's talking about this team. And then everyone started talking about them. And so I think, again, deep down, I think Lanning kind of loves the ending of the Northwestern game because he can now hammer home a bunch of stuff before the Beaver game, before they head to Penn State, and then Penn State itself. But I don't have any right now. I don't have any concerns though. Crowd noise is going to factor into that game. I'm sure Oregon will have some issues, but I'm not sitting here thinking from a procedural standpoint, from an operational standpoint, it's going to be any worse than a typical game in a really big game environment like that.
We'll see. That's going to be something to monitor. I mean, I don't have any reference point because I've never been at Penn State. Right. I've heard from people just that it's something else, and I'm kind of bummed I won't be there myself for this one.
I mean, I won't be surprised if Oregon has false starts. I'm not going to downplay it, but I don't think it's going to be any drastically any louder. It could be louder than what Autzen is, when it was against Ohio State. But I think Oregon's got a lot of guys that have played in environments that replicate that to a degree, maybe not 100% all the way, that they shouldn't be caught off guard by it. Doesn't mean it's not going to impact things, but they should not go into that being like, oh my God, I didn't think it was going to be this loud.
It would be fun, by the way, to see the big board have loud on it, get loud when every Oregon has the football in the second half. They won't do that. And frankly, your point, that would be extremely disrespectful to the opponent. And that also would do something that talks about, which is focusing on it 1 week at a time. And that certainly would be not what that approach is. But I thought that was a fun question there from our guy Dunks and Ducks. Final one of the show from @Stableford. Can someone teach Dante to slide? He's taken 2 hold your breath hard hits in 2 weeks. Not sure how many more should be taking, especially in expected blowouts. #Autzen Audibles. This is something I was thinking about too, even before I saw the question, and was thinking I might ask Dan about this, because I know when Bo was here, there were some kind of instance of this early on, and Dan had some funny comments about that. This is kind of like young quarterback 101, guys diving forward rather than sliding, or guys trying to do a little, extend the play a little bit more and taking some contact. But like it was like, you go back to Oklahoma State, the defensive lineman lands on his leg, and it kind of happens late. I know that bothered some Oregon fans. I also think it's like a 300-pound person running downfield who maybe isn't as fleet of foot, just falling. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. But either way, he fell on Dante's leg. That didn't look super fun. And then this last game, he gets down, but he gets absolutely crunched and his helmet comes off. And for a second, I was worried he had like taken a shot to the eye or something had happened there, because he was kind of blinking a little bit. And as somebody who people on this podcast know, because I was just wearing orange tinted sunglasses for a podcast and was out for a while, concussions are really, they suck. And they can absolutely, Justin Fields is dealing with this in the NFL right now, and they're not sure he's going to make his next start. So in the moment, I was kind of going through that. It's a rivalry game, and I said earlier, it could get chippy. I'm not going to say Trent Bray is going to tell his guys to go headhunting and hurt Oregon's players. I don't anticipate that's going to be the case. I think he has a lot more to worry about, by the way, than taking shots at another team's quarterback. Like, he needs to figure out what's going on there, get that ship righted, keep his job. Frankly, I think it would potentially hurt your ability to do that if there's some sort of scandal around intentionally taking shots at a rival team's quarterback. But I'm not going to say that like Oregon State is not going to try to hit Dante if he's if he's upright downfield. So I agree. Like this is something that is on my mind. And with your number 2 quarterback, Austin Novosad's health kind of up in the air. I know he traveled, but he hasn't played the last 2 games with a lat injury on his throwing arm. With Luke Moga looking good in instances, but not as sharp as a passer. He's missed a couple I thought could have extended drives the last couple of games. Absolutely, it's valuable for Dante to preserve himself, and that's something that I'm in agreement here that I'd like to see him do a little bit more of.
I think not only the second part, we probably should ask this to Dan, like you said. That's a good question. That's a good angle to cover here. But I would almost argue too that sliding is going to be an important thing to watch and monitor and for him to adjust to. But also, once the game kind of becomes, assuming for Oregon, like, hey, this is what's going to happen. You're going to win games and it's over, but they just have to now run the clock out. I would argue that as soon as that happens, you pull him for safety reasons, because I don't think Luke Moga has looked terrible. I also don't think Luke Moga has looked drastically impressive either, where if something were to happen to Moore and Novosad's not available to play, you are going to be in a bind. So you do not want to see Dante Moore maybe take unnecessary contact than he needs to in this game against Oregon State. So as soon as it's, hey, they can't come back from this, you pull him immediately.
Yeah, I would say similar to all the other games, like give him a drive in the third quarter, get him out. I think that feels like the approach. I know this last game he played a little more. I think he played two second half drives, but and if it's honestly if it's close to what it was in the first 2 weeks, where it was like 38-3, 41-3, I don't know if you need him in the second half. And again, I don't know if I expect it to be quite that lopsided in a rivalry environment. I know the spread is bigger. I just think maybe the Beavers are going to have a little bit more fight than some of these teams. It could be completely wrong. I wouldn't be surprised. We'll talk about it as we get further in the week and I look more into their team. But I totally agree. Once the game is no longer in doubt, get your star quarterback on the sideline, keep him healthy, and make sure he's ready to go against Penn State the following week. That's the game that matters.
All right, that's going to do it for us here on the Autzen Audibles podcast. Thank you for submitting your questions. Really appreciate it. They're always great, even the funny ones, and they're going to make it sometimes. So continue to send those as well. But until the next one, you've been listening to the Autzen Audibles podcast.
Talk to you there, folks.